Hey guys, so I am going to be going over today's example problem, which you'll find on slide 5. It says, given the table, which is right here in gray, create the graph, equation, and a word problem to match the table. Okay, so if I look here, it looks like I am comparing hours to distance. So it looks like whoever this was, at 0 hours, they had a 0 distance. At 1 hour, they traveled 55, well, let's just say like miles. 2 hours, they traveled 110 miles. 3 hours was 165. And then I also have 5 hours, which was 285. So if I look at this information, okay, for the person, let's just say they're driving, right? The first thing I need to do is find the starting point. Well, the starting point is where the person started. So at 0 hours, they had 0 distance. So their starting point would be 0 miles. Then I have the constant rate of change. So I need to figure out the distance they are traveling every hour. So I would just kind of find a pattern here. So 0 hours, 0 distance. 1 hour later, they're at 55. Well, how do I go from 0 to 55? If I just add 55 to 0, that gets me to this one. Another hour passes. I'm left with 110. So let's see, if I take 55 from the first hour and I add another 55, does that give me 110? According to the calculator, it does. So let me just test one more. One more hour passes. I'm supposed to be at 165. So I would take 110 from hour 2 and add another 55 miles. And yep, does give me 165. So I notice that my constant rate of change is this person is going 55 miles, or I'm adding 55 miles for every hour. So that is my constant rate of change, 55 miles per 1 hour. All right. So I have my two most important pieces of information, my starting point and my constant rate of change. Now I can go ahead and I could make my graph. Well, on my graph part, I need to identify what's on my x-axis, what's on my y-axis, and I can get those two pieces from my table. So my x values are going to be my number of hours. So I'm going to type number of hours. My y values are going to be my distance. And since I was already talking about miles, I'm just going to say that this is in miles. It could be in feet, it could be in yards, whichever you prefer. All right. So I've labeled my axes, and now I just got to plot a couple of points here. So I know at the start, I'm going to drag that dot. I'm going to place it here. That's where they started. 1 hour later, they're at 55. So I'm going to put another dot at 1 hour. Here's 50. 55 is like just above that. So I'm going to leave it like right there. 2 hours, they were at 110. So 2 hours, here's 100. 110 is like right above that. So I'm going to place it right, let's just put it like right there. And then I'm going to skip the 3 hours and go to the 5 hours. So at 5 hours, they covered 285 miles. So here's 5 hours. Here's 250. So 285 is like just above that. All right. So I have my dots. And if you look here at the blue highlighted, it's kind of like directions for the graph. Probably should have read this before, but it basically just says click and drag the dots to place on the graph. Then create a line on the graph that goes through the points. So that's my line tool over here. I'm going to click that, click my first point, drag to my last point, and then I could even extend it. So if I was to be asked a question later on, that'd be like, hey, like, let's say this person was driving at hour 8, about where would they be? Well, they would be around, they would be around a little over 400. So maybe like 425 or something like that. Okay. So I've done my graph. Now I can move over to problem 4, which is my equation. Again, the format of my equation is y equals mx plus b. M represents my constant rate of change. B represents my starting point, which I have both of those numbers up here. So when I go do my equation, I start with y equals, because I don't know what y is. My constant rate of change is 55, and then I place my x next to 55 for my miles per hour, plus my starting point, which is 0. Well, since I'm technically not adding anything extra, the plus 0 part, I really don't need to write that part. So my equation really is just y equals 55x. So I've got the equation done. Now I need to create a word problem that matches what's happening in my table, my graph, and my equation. So this is just kind of like a made-up word problem. So, and I've kind of already been talking about it. This person is driving, whoever the person is, right? They're driving 55 miles per hour, and this is where they started. So let's just delete that part, and I'm going to type in a word problem. Now I'm just going to pick a name. It's any name, really. You don't have to name your person. You can just say he, she, her, him, whoever. Okay, but I'll name the person just because I want to name the person. So let's just say that this is Miranda. Okay, so Miranda started her drive at home, and she was driving to Dallas. She drove 55 miles per hour. And then I'm going to ask a question. So, how long did... actually, no. Let's say. About how many miles did she drive in, and let's go with like 8 hours. About how many miles does she drive in 8 hours? So I'm asking this question, and this question is something that I could easily either use my equation for, I could even keep adding on to my table, or I could go to my graph and I'd be like, okay, here's 8 hours. She drove about 425 miles. So I should be able to answer the question from any of these pieces that I created. Okay. One way that you could also just double check that you're on the right track is if you plug your equation into your calculator. So to plug an equation in, you always go to y equals, clear that one, and I'm going to type in 55x. Then I'm going to go to my table. So that would be second graph. And then here's my table. So this table should match this table. If I wrote my equation correctly, that is definitely a way to check. So 0, 0, 155, 2 and 110, all the way to 5 and 285. Whoop. Nope, something's wrong there. That should be 275. Okay, that's fine. I will just change my table to 275. Okay, and so on. So by 8 hours, yeah, so my estimation was kind of correct. I said at 8 hours, she was at 440 miles, which is pretty close to my 425 that I had guessed. So that is what you are going to be doing today. Once you are finished with your information, the slide after is going to be a couple of questions that you'll be asking, and then you'll also have an exit ticket at the end for today. I hope this was helpful. Y'all have a good day.